I think numbers have stabilized out. So we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome back to everyone to our industry career series. Back again with Brad Fackler, talking to us today about industry interviews. How do you do it? What are some best practices for interviewing? With that, I'll turn it over to you, Brad.
Thank you, Emily, and welcome to our program on interviews. For those of you that have worked with me, you may have heard me say that interviews are like playing a sport. The more you do, the more you practice, the better you get. And so hopefully in today's presentation, we'll give you some tips and some good ideas that will help you improve your interviewing. But before we get there, let me give you the latest hiring numbers. And these are just hot off the press here. I just got these for the fourth quarter of 25. And you will see that the fourth quarter of 25 is down just slightly from the third quarter. And you may say, well, that's not good. But the fact of the matter is if you look at the other fourth quarters, as you went through from 22 up to 25, you will see that the fourth quarter is generally significantly lower than the third quarter. And there's some good reason for that. Number one, with the holidays, there just aren't as many hiring days. And number two, many companies are getting budgets ready to come out of the gate at the first part of the year. So the fact that this is down just slightly may be a good indicator. And this is something that I think you'll look at that looks positive as well, because the number of companies announcing layoffs in the fourth quarter was down significantly. This has led the folks from Gene Coda, the ones that pull these numbers, to I would say be a little bit optimistic going into 2026. The fourth quarter data suggests that the employment market may be stabilizing and employers continue to operate selectively, not like the days of 21 and 22, but they're operating selectively and with a strong focus on role necessities. The other side of the equation then is the financial or the capital markets piece. M&A continues at a measured pace, and biotech IPO activity, initial public offering activity remains limited, but there is at the same time a lot of follow-on financing. So the market looks like that is starting to turn around as well. And I've been reading that since the first of the year, there have been a number of IPOs that have been announced. So that is positive.
Brad, for those who may not know the terms, what is M&A? And what is IPO?
Thank you. Yes. M&A, mergers and acquisitions, and the IPO are the initial public offerings. These are when companies go public for the first time. And thank you for doing that. Those are terms that I just roll over. And so, yes.
Which, if you do see more business terms, Brad has another talk next month all about those terms that they use in the business world that you may not know yet as a scientist.
So today we're going to cover it this way. We're going to look at what's the difference between interviews in industry and interviews in the academic world, the importance of preparation, and we'll give you some tools to help you prepare for interviews. What does the industry interview process look like? And then we'll provide you with some strategies that will lead you to can lead to successful interviews. And at the end, then we always cover what are some resources that are available to you here at NIH to help you with the interviews. So we said, how are they different? First of all, and as you saw by the hiring numbers that I showed a couple of slides back, interviews in industry go on year round. Now, there tends to be a roller coaster effect. We talked about a little lower in the fourth quarter. Sometimes it's a little lower in the first quarter as well. And the highest quarters tend to be the second and third quarters. But there is hiring that goes on every quarter of the year. Industry interviews will focus more on results and accomplishments. If you remember the last presentation we did on resumes and cover letters, we said your resume should be a selling document, and that's where you want to put these accomplishment statements. It will focus on your skills, on your teamwork, because much of industry science is done in teams, and leadership experience. But if you're interviewing for a bench position, you'll get the science questions as well. And that is particularly if the leaders of the lab are scientists as well. So when you're interviewing with those people, you'll get questions about your science knowledge. And your publication record is not as important for industry positions as it is in academia. Now, I want to make sure that I explain that effectively, because I don't want you to come away and say, publications aren't important. They are important, but they're not as important. And the example I give is that if you and I are both going for an academic position and you have 10 publications and I have 5, it is likely you will get that job every time. In industry, it's just not as clear cut. Okay? There are different measures of success other than publications. So today, we're going to talk about preparing your interview skills. How do you target companies? How do you target jobs? How do you network? And I always say it that way because that is probably the most important thing you can do as you begin to get into the interview process. And prepare your industry resume, cover letter, and your elevator pitch. The industry process looks like this. The first step is usually a phone interview. If you are successful there, you will move on to an on-site, or in today's environment, some of those may be done virtually, but it could be you would be talking with various people in various positions in the company. There may be a panel interview. We'll take a look at hard interviews versus easy interviews. And we'll talk about SARS, the success stories, and a great way to prepare yourself for the dreaded behavioral questions. And then what are the questions you should ask? And we said at the end, we'll provide you with some resources. So targeting companies is very important at the beginning. In my experience, mass distribution of resumes and generic job sites, and I describe generic job sites like Monster and Indeed, and those for PhD scientists, those are not particularly useful, and those rarely result in an interview. So how do you target these companies? Well, you look for companies that have a similar research focus to what your experience is. Remember, a company is likely to hire you based on your experience doing the responsibilities of the job. So if you're in a similar research focus, that's a good company to go after. Another way is geography. Where do you want to live? Where do you want to work? As we've seen in past presentations, biotech in this country tends to be bicoastal, and that's where the big hubs tend to be. Here on the East Coast, North Carolina, Maryland, Philadelphia, New York, New Jersey, Boston, and on the West Coast, San Diego, LA, Orange County, San Francisco Bay Area, and Seattle. And another way to target is companies where you might have contacts. So here at NIH, it's not unusual to do joint work between companies and NIH labs. You may know people in certain companies, and that's a way to target companies. And also company size. What size of company do you want to work for? And there's no one size that's better than the other. It's really more of a preference as to whether you want to work for a startup company, a small company, a mid-sized company, or a larger company. Sources for the information. One is the Biotechnology Innovation Organization, they have local chapters. And so if you look particularly in the area where there's the big biotech hubs, you'll find lists of companies. You'll find networking opportunities. You'll probably you may find people that work there as well. FDA.gov, this is the website that tracks the compounds that are in clinical trials. So if you're looking for a particular industry focus, you can look here and see what companies are doing work in those areas. And certainly the company website, that will give you a lot of information on the company itself. Networking. That is expanding your contacts outside of the academic area. So you need to form contacts in the business world. Where do you find them? Well, social media is a great place. LinkedIn, I think, is probably the premier business networking site. But others, Facebook, Twitter, ResearchGate are other ones. Alumni database, I would like to say the NIH alumni database, and I will be able to say that later this year. I'm hopeful.
Fingers crossed.
But yes, but that is it can be a good tool because if you find jobs in companies, you can go to LinkedIn and search for that company and NIH, and you will find people who both are working for that company, but have a past and so have a commonality for you at NIH. Conferences is an excellent way to make contacts. Professional societies, PubMed, patent databases. Again, we find people that are working in your area, and the career centers, like here at OITE. But also the career centers back at your university as well is a good place to find people.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Oh, sure.
Do either of you know what the status of the NIH Career Fair is? Because that's probably one of the biggest exposures we have, right?
Tech Symposium is going to be May 18th through 21st this year. It'll be
So that's been
coming out soon.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Awesome.
It was originally scheduled during the shutdown.
Yeah, that's why I asked.
Yes, and so now we're moving it and moving it back to its kind of original
Full time. Yeah, it's normally in May.
in the spring. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So
It got canceled last year with all of the chaos of 2025. The one in May of 2025 moved it to November. Got shut down for the shutdown. Now it is finally happening May of 2026.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Nice.
Informational interviews are a good way to network, and remember, you ask for advice, you don't ask for jobs. And I said at the very beginning, practice is a good way to improve your interviewing, and doing informational interviews is a way to practice your interview skills. And again, your best chance of landing a job is to be recommended by somebody in the company. I don't know what the latest numbers are, but being recommended by somebody in the company is way out ahead of whatever's second place. So resumes and cover letters, we'll just cover this quickly because we've done this in the past. Remember, your resume is a selling document, and it varies based on the job ad. Now, let me clarify that as well, because sometimes when I say you want to tailor your resume to fit the job ad, people get this dreaded look on their face like, oh my God, I have to rewrite this resume. No, you may change a half a dozen words in there. You may change the order of your skills list just to be able to more closely match that particular job. So it's not a rewrite, but it is just tailoring it a little bit. You want to focus on your accomplishments and your results. What is important about your work? What do we know now that we didn't know because of your work? So you want to focus on those kinds of areas. Not a place for your life history, and it's generally in this industry, it's generally organized in reverse chronological order. So starting where you are and working back. Cover letters, 3 general parts, how you found the job, that helps the companies. Basic information on yourself, and it's always good to say something nice about the company. Why do you want to work for this company? You find that information on the homepage of their website. They'll tell you how they want you to see their company, and you tell them how important it is for you to work for a company that does that. Okay? Why you're interested in the position, how you best fit the position, and again, you want to match the wording. And the how you best fit the position is really taking those accomplishment statements from your resume and putting them over in a paragraph form. So you talk about how you've done these things in the past. And then close. You want to ask to take the next step, and that you will follow up. So the old, please feel free to give me a call. No, I will check back with you regarding that position. All right. Now, one thing about cover letters that has changed over the last several years is that in the old days, a cover letter was always would accompany your resume. Today, maybe yes, maybe no. There's a lot of companies that have gone to their online application process. So you may not even put your resume in there. You may just put pieces of it in there. And there may not be a place for a cover letter. In that case, they probably don't want one. So you don't put it in. The cover letter, if they provide a space for cover letter, yeah, then you should put one in. Also, they may say here's a place where you can put additional documents. Cover letter is probably good there too. And again, for help preparing these things, come see us here in the OIT. Your elevator speech. Okay, it's always good to have that elevator speech and have it down pat. It works very well when you're doing the informational interviews. We'll see as you come in here and you get questions during your interviews. It works well too. All right. It's got key elements. What's your name? This is where I've been and how that has prepared me for where I am today. This is where I am, and this is what I'm really good at. And then this is where I want to go. So it's really those 4 things. It doesn't have to be long. You'll see here, you should be able to tell it in 40 seconds. If it takes you 40 seconds, even that may be a little too long. So the example, got my name. Here's where I am and what I've done. This is what I'm really good at. And here's where I want to go. So you can see, and if you read, you can read that in about 20 seconds. You can say it probably in less. So you want to, that's what you want to do. And you want to, once you have this statement and you use it and people respond to it, then you want to get it down pat. You want it to just be able to roll off your tongue, even without thinking about it. So, what are the key to successful interviewing? 1, preparation. Prepare by researching the job and the company, anticipating the kinds of questions you will be asked, practicing your answers, your responses to those questions, and you want to phrase those responses in the terms of your successes, okay, of what you've done well. And then prioritizing your questions. You always want to have questions as you go into the interview. And remember, the interview is a 2-way street. You should not only prepare your answers, but also your questions. So the company wants to learn more about you and your background and determine if you're a fit for that company. You should ask questions so you learn more about the job, the people there, the workplace. You want to decide if this job is right for you as well. So researching the job and the company. And I can tell you, it is so much easier today than it was when I started out looking for jobs. That information is on the web everywhere. So you want to look at, from the employer's website, the company's product line and its priorities. So what products does it have on the market? What products does it have in development? Who are the senior managers? What's their background? How many of them worked at NIH for a while? So those kinds of things. And I always suggest looking at the key events, the press releases. That tells you what's going on from a business sense in that company. And normally when you look at the press releases, they will go back 6 months or so. So you kind of can see what over a period of time, what's been happening in that company. Network. Again, you can use LinkedIn, professional alumni networks, find people that work there. Library resources, again, you can use those. Who are the current employees? Are there any that you know? Are there any that you may have crossed paths with? Or are there any in there that you have contacts who may have crossed paths with? And professionals in the field. Do they know? Does your PI here at NIH, does he know people in this company? And so these are ways that you can find people to talk to in the company. So now the process, and what does it look like? And the first thing you'll note here is that you should be networking throughout the whole process. And by the way, the networking shouldn't start when you decide to get a job in industry. It should have started before you decided to get that job in industry. So as we talked about, the first step is you want to prepare your resume and target the companies. Which companies, where are they? What do they do? That takes a little while to do. So you do that and you get that first phone interview. But you weren't selected to go forward, so you didn't do that. But you have another phone interview. And this time they invited you in for an on-site interview and a presentation. But you finished second in that one, and you didn't get that one. But you got the third phone interview. This one you got to go in, do the presentation and the interview. And you got the job. So now you have to negotiate the salary. And by Kentucky windage, you see that probably will take you, and this is focused on postdocs, PhDs. This will take you about a year to do that. The rule in business is it takes about 1 month of job search for every $10,000 in salary for that position. And these positions that the postdocs are getting are in the $120,000. And that goes more or less depending on which areas of the country that you're going to. So let's take a look at what this phone interview generally lasts about 30 to 40 minutes. It is a screening interview. They may conduct these phone interviews with a dozen people. And the purpose here is to find out which ones do we want to bring in for the interview. They will assess 3 things. They want to know that you know what your resume says you know. That'll be the science questions. They're going to want to know that you're ready to leave academia and that you want to go to work in industry and you want to go to work for their company. And then your communication skills. how will you fit in the company? Who does it? More and more recruiters are doing these. I know AstraZeneca uses recruiters to do this initial screening stage. These will be general questions about your experience. They will have a list of criteria that they want to find out. HR, those will be similar questions to what the recruiter will ask. And the hiring manager may do their own. And in that case, that the interview may focus more on some of the science, so your science knowledge and skills. So how do you prepare? First of all, be able to effectively, concisely communicate your elevator, your accomplishments, your skills, and your experiences. You want to be able to be able to communicate those things very cleanly and clearly. Prepare your rationale for leaving academia. Why do you want to do it now? Why this company? Why this position? And review your research on the company. So who's the management? What are the current products, technologies in development, and the events, the press releases. And prepare what questions you want to ask as well. Now conducting the phone interview, find a place where you won't be disturbed. You can use the OITE offices here for interviews if need be. We'll always make one available to you. Use a landline where you can. Now, cell phones have improved dramatically since I began doing this, but still, if you have a shot at using a landline, it's better. Cell phones still have a way of cutting out at the most inopportune times. No speaker phones. I think it's better to speak right into the into the phone to make sure that they're not missing anything.
On a cell phone, best to use headphones. Let's hear that.
Yeah, there you go. Yep. Prepare your top accomplishments, your skills and experiences, and you want to make sure you cover those during the call. And you want to work those into the questions, even though there may not be a direct question to that effect. And the nice thing is it's over the phone, so they can't see you. You can have all your documents laid right in front of them. You'll have them laid out in front of you. So now the on-site interview. This one tends to last a little longer, sometimes 4 hours, sometimes up to 8 hours. They can be grueling. And you're likely to meet with multiple people from various levels in the organization. So you'll meet the hiring manager. You will probably meet peers of the positions, so people you would be working with should you get that job. You will talk to HR, and you're likely to talk to the hiring manager's boss. And in the case that this is a small company, the hiring manager's boss may be the CEO or the chief scientific officer of the company. You're generally going to be asked to present your current work, and it doesn't have to be your current work. It could be work that you did back in your PhD program. So you want to, but they generally will ask you for a scientific presentation. And you'll get a more in-depth assessment of the same 3 things that they asked about in the phone screen. What are your skills and your accomplishments? What do you know? Your desire to leave academia and join this company. And how do you communicate? How will you fit in there? What's it going to be like working with you 8 hours a day, 5 days a week? And it may include a lunch or dinner with members of the team. And that the thing to remember is that even during the lunch or the dinner, that's still part of the interview. They're still going to be making those assessments. So interviewing with various functions and levels, what do you want to think about? Well, if you're interviewing with the hiring manager, that person is going to be interested in your scientific skills. How do you communicate? How will you fit in my group? The hiring manager's boss, and as we said, it could be an officer in the company. They're going to focus on bigger picture things. How does this lab fit into where our company is headed? And sometimes more strategic. And peers, they're going to be interested in your scientific knowledge as well and your interpersonal skills. What's it going to be like sitting next to you 8 hours a day, 5 days a week? HR, they're going to be interested in your work experiences, your work history, and the work environment. So these are going to be elements other than science. What's it going to be there? What's it going to be like on a day-to-day basis? And sometimes you will get these people in groups. So the panel tends to be a little bit more difficult when you have multiple people because it tends to get a little bit harder to read the room, so to speak. Who really is in control here, right? And I think the best overall strategy in doing this is focus directly on the person asking the question and then pan to the rest of the group. So, and an interview questions you're going to get. Well, these are the opportunity questions. Provide you the opportunity to sell yourself, essentially. Hey, what do you do? What are you good at? What skills you have? What's your interest? Strengths. This is where you've done your homework. And the dreaded behavioral questions. They're going to require you to cite examples of where you've dealt with issues of the question. For the first one, the opportunity question, tell me about yourself. Somebody asks you that question, where do you go?
Elevator pitch.
The elevator pitch, absolutely. That's where you want it to just roll off your tongue. Yep. Why are you interested in our company? What interests you most about this position? And what do you know about our organization? So this gives you a chance to show them that you've done your homework. And then tell me about your strengths. Be realistic, and it's always good to relate them to the requirements of the job. Okay? And generally, if you get this question, you'll get the what are your weaknesses? All right. The absolute worst answer to that question is I don't have any. Because they will know you're full of it. Okay. But you want to think this one through. You want to choose an actual weakness and one that wouldn't be a fatal flaw for this position. If you're interviewing in a hard charging, fast paced lab, and your weakness is, I just have trouble getting up in it, probably not going to go over so well. All right. So you want to think through and always end this with, and here's what I'm doing to address this. I know I have this, and here's what I'm doing to address. So some sample behavioral questions. Describe a time and give me an example. Describe the system that you use. Tell me about a time when you came up with an innovative solution. Now, one of the frameworks that works so well for these, before I get there, let me start with what you don't want to do. Okay, how to avoid over answering the questions. Excuse me. Providing too much detail can diminish the quality and the focus of your answers. Don't ask questions that weren't asked. Don't answer questions that weren't asked. Okay. Oftentimes, a question will come up that may lead you down to a path because there's a relationship of other things, but you don't need to go there. The interviewer doesn't know that. and avoid negativity. When negative things happen, you try to describe them in a positive light if you can. And one that I've added here is too much honesty. This is a little bit like over answering the question, but you go into a level of honesty that is not necessarily required. So when you prepare your answers, develop examples that demonstrate how your skills and experiences relate to the major job responsibilities. Okay. What have you done? These are what I call success stories. Create answers that highlight your strengths, be memorable, and set you apart from the others. All done. And here's where the situation, action, result, the SARS technique can be very helpful. Oh, thank you. I looked for one of those pops out there. I couldn't find it.
I know all the secrets of where things are hiding in this office.
And practice so you can tell these stories in about 60 to 90 seconds. All right. So, what is this and how do you do it? You describe a situation, a challenge, a problem that needed to be solved. You describe the action you took, and then you describe the results. How did the situation improve based on the action that you took? So here's an example. And again, it's a short example. Graduate student symposium, poor attendance. 21 symposium chair, I developed a marketing strategy targeted at increasing attendance. As a result, we noted a 30% increase, and the committee agreed with this new marketing plan should be used in the future. Right? Very simple, but it covers all three of those things. Okay? And it is an example of what I call the success story. So what are the keys to success for this one? Prepare them in advance. I recommend that you have 4 to 6 of them ready to go. Okay? When I was interviewing for jobs, I would have about 10 or 12 of these. I kept them in a little notebook because we didn't have so many computers at that time. Okay? But I suggest you write them out and keep them with you. And you write them out for a couple of reasons. Number one, you want to see what works and what doesn't, so you can make the changes in there. And number two, you want to be able to work through them and say them very just off the cuff. So again, you want to practice, practice, practice. Say them out loud, say them in front of a mirror, say them in front of a friend, say them in front of your significant other. Just talk about these all the time. And also then prepare the transitions. These work most effectively when you can smoothly segue from one to another in answering the question. Because sometimes a question will lead to 2 successes that we've had. And it's not a bad thing to use the same success story a couple of times in the interview. So sometimes you'll have a hard interview, sometimes you'll have an easy interview, right? A hard interview, direct questions, maybe confrontational, and they might interrupt your answer, and it's a very stressful situation. Okay, the key to this, remain calm, remain focused. Now, the good news is that if you're interviewing in a life sciences company, you're very seldom going to get one of these, right? If you're interviewing for a customer service representative for Comcast, you may get these. And the interview, the easy one. They may be selling you on the company. The interviewer may be selling you, lobbing you softball questions. Right? What do you like about our company? And will be confrontational and frank. What do you want to remember? Still an interview. Okay. They're still, even though it's in that very amiable style, they're still going to be assessing the same kinds of things. And prepare your questions, right? Just like what's your weakness? I don't have any. When they get to the point where they ask you, do you have any questions? And you say, I don't have any, not so good. So these questions should be well developed that can reinforce your interest in the position, indicate you've done your homework on the company, strengthen the interview's views of your knowledge, be used to highlight specific strengths that you want to make sure you get across, and an important tool to determine if the company, the position, the management, and the team are right for you. And if you need, we can give you sample questions. I have a document that says 200 questions to ask the interviewer. And if you ever use 200, you won't get that job. It's really to pick and choose. So here's some questions that you may want to ask. Right? Use your opportunity to ask questions to continue to sell yourself and seek that can be used in subsequent interviews. How about, I enjoy working on a team. Will there be opportunities for me to do that? And that's a good one. Here's one that was part of the presentation when I started doing this, one of my greatest strengths, my interpersonal skills. How do you see that fitting into this position in the company? Don't pander when you're asking these questions, okay? If your greatest strength is your interpersonal skills, I'm guessing by this time in the interview, the interviewer knows that, right? So just be a little bit careful that you're not kind of over pandering with these questions. There's a blog called Interviewing the Interviewer, which is the thing to take a look at. And presenting your science, presenting your research, the audience will generally be company scientists, used to determine your level of knowledge and understanding of specific scientific concepts, and even if it's not directly related to the position, they will be able to look at how you think through a scientific problem and take it forward. And it's also used as a barometer of your presentations. One of the things industry scientists have to do is they have to present their science. So some helpful hints. Start on time, end on time. Generally, they allot you 1 hour, and that should be a presentation of about 35 to 40 minutes, and the remainder as Q&A. And you know what? If you present for 35 minutes and you have 10 minutes of questions and you let those people out 15 minutes early, nobody's going to think that's a problem. Limit the number of slides. For 35 minutes, I prefer 25 slides. Sometimes, if you talk real nice to me, you can get me up to 30. But if you say I have 40 minutes, I have 40 slides, no, that's not going to fly. Because the last thing you want to do is go overtime on this. Industry scientists have this alarm in the back of your head. And if they get to where it's approaching an hour in your talk, they're likely to get up and move. So start on time, stay on time. And tell a story. So it's not altogether different than a scientific presentation you would do here at NIH. but you want to tell a story. You want to talk about the rationale for your research. Why did you want to look at this? And based on why we wanted to look at it, we chose this protocol. Here are the results we've received, or here's the results we expect to receive. And then, most importantly, here's what we see are the next steps in the research or the potential applications for this research. Right? Remember, industry scientists are developing products, and they think in linear terms. And so you want to present your story in that way. At the end, close the interview. Is there any additional information I can provide? Send individual thank you notes. I always recommend you collect business cards so you have the correct contact information. The best way to do that is if you have your own business cards and you hand them a business card, that's a signal for them to hand you one. And then you have the information that you need to send the individual notes. Okay? Note the email addresses of the interviewers. And email follow-up and thank you notes are perfectly fine. And it's always good to include a specific part of that conversation with that individual in there. So it shows you were paying attention and that you valued what that conversation is about. And follow up for status updates. Kind of Brad's rule of thumb is about 2 to 3 weeks after the interview is a reasonable time. And you can follow up with HR, you may follow up with the hiring manager. It depends on kind of how the interview went. Why I didn't get the job. It may be worth some time to think about if you get turned down for the job, what was the reason? And these reasons come from this book. It's by Don Alexander. Those of you that have been part of the industry job search work group would know Don. He was part of the team of experts we brought in. Don covered resumes and cover letters, but he wrote this book. This is a very good book about the whole interview process. It's just kind of a down and dirty, this is what works and this is what doesn't work. So, what do you need to do now? Well, you want to construct your search plan. What companies, what industries are you interested in working at? And determine the optimal strategy. How do you get to know people in that industry, in those companies? Enhance your network of contacts. Create your elevator pitch and identify your most important successes. And build your resume. So, what resources do we have for you here at NIH? First of all, the career counselors. We're pretty good at helping you go through these things, help you identify industry career opportunities, build and refine your resume, conduct mock interviews, provide a repository of questions for you. The OITE website is good. It's got example documents, resumes, cover letters, pretty much anything that you need. Past programs are on the OITE YouTube channel, so you can go back and look at programs and other job search tools that we have. And you see the website there. That is that's how you can schedule an appointment with one of the counselors. And the books. This one is like my Bible. Most of them aren't as dog-eared as this one, but this is the book that describes just about every position in the pharma and biotech sector. And it does it in such a way that it describes what's the background, so what education and experience would they look to hire into that position? What do people do on a day-to-day basis that do those jobs, and what may those jobs set you up for? And then we talked about this one, and this is Toby Friedman, the author on this one. And then we talked about this one from Don Alexander. Networking sites, we talked about LinkedIn, ResearchGate, hopefully in the future, the NIH alumni database, and the web, company sites, thousands of articles on interviewing do's and don'ts. Just be a little bit selective because some of those are good and some of those are not so good. And when I say not so good, they may not be applicable in this industry. And then those of you interested in staying in this area, some websites for jobs in the area. First of all, the BioHub Maryland. That is a website from the Maryland Technology Council. It's got a number of job opportunities and networking opportunities. BioBuzz is an industry organization here in it's here in Maryland, but they also have a division in Philadelphia and one in North Carolina. BioHealth Innovation, another industry organization. These two in particular are good, would be better for PhD level jobs. And these two also have a weekly newsletter. So it may be good to register for that. So you see what's going on to companies in the area. There's networking opportunities, and there are job boards on all of those. The Maryland Department of Commerce, the Life Sciences Directory. This is a searchable database of every biotech company in the state of Maryland. And everybody knows AstraZeneca, but you may not know the other 2,699 of the companies here in Maryland. But it's a good way to do that. There are contacts in there, and not right on that site, but in the Maryland Department of Commerce website, there's a job. For those of you that may not want to stay here in Maryland, you may want to go to one of the other biotech hubs. These are the local bio organizations in these areas. If you just go to those, and it will give you the same kinds of things. Those have things like the Maryland Department of Commerce company lists. They'll have networking opportunities. They have job boards in there as well. And with that, I think we've reached the end. So I will take some questions.
Fantastic. Yes, you're here in person. You get first dibs on questions.
Thanks. So I know this is focused more on research industry roles, but for those of us, that are looking for admin or clinical, is there anything you'd suggest that we do differently?
At the level we're talking about here, no, it isn't. Okay, it's how you would define those, your accomplishment statements. So that might be a little bit different for those roles than it would be for other roles. But what you would do to get a job and the interview process you would go through would be exactly the same here.
Including the content of you giving your research talk and everything like that?
Yep.
Anyone online, feel free to raise your hand and unmute yourself, or you can type your questions into the chat. We'll go through those either way. Yes, you will have access to these slides and the recording afterwards. We will email that out to everyone a few days later. Brad, do you know how the job search timeline is different in Europe? So anything about the European timeline?
At one time that was different, but here. There we go. Okay. At one time that was different, but job searches in Europe and job searches here are pretty similar today.
Yeah, the same roughly a year-long timeline that you're looking
Yeah,
at.
and yes, the timeline would be the same, and the process that you would go through would be very similar as well. Yes.
I'm sure there will be some variances by each country. So your best resource will be reach out to people who live and work in those countries currently, and talk to them about their experiences and learn from them. NIH fellows, reach out to the Visiting Fellows Committee. They have a really big network of alumni from NIH now living and working in different countries. So if there's a particular place you're looking for, Visiting Fellows Committee is a great place to build that network of networking there. Phone interviews, are they typically scheduled ahead or will they ever surprise call you?
Now, I've never seen where they have surprise called you. In general, they will reach out to you and you will provide them with a couple of dates. They will give you a general time frame, and you will provide them with times and dates that work for you. And that's generally how it happens.
For lunch interviews, how do you navigate any food allergies? Do you bring your own food? Do you tell them in advance? How do you do that?
Yeah, normally, and in this industry, I've seen it more than not. As they're setting that up, they generally will ask you. And if at the end of the day they serve something that you can't eat, you just explain that you can't eat that. I mean, it's you don't want to end up with a big rash just because you want to make them feel happy.
We don't want you to stop breathing while you're in a job interview. That would not go well.
No.
Yeah, absolutely not a faux pas to tell them that you can't eat something for whatever reason.
Yes.
Totally fine.
Yes.
But there should be someone who tells you that in advance. There should be someone like coordinating an on-site interview. So absolutely reach out to that coordinator and tell them that in advance. What are some important differences between interviews and academic interviews?
And we covered this a little bit at the beginning. Number one, the industry interviews occur throughout the year. And so the industry interviews will be more on your accomplishments, your successes, and your knowledge of science, and less about your publications. And the academic research is going to be more focused on your publication record and things like that.
In academia as well, especially if you're interviewing for faculty positions, it's much more focused on what will your own research program look like? What do you want to study for the next 5 years? In industry, there's less flexibility in terms of what you're studying. That's mostly driven by the company. So they won't be asking you as many sort of like future forward questions about your research. They may ask a lot of technical questions and details of like, do you know how to do these techniques? But they won't be as much about your future research plans as it would in an academic interview. Do you know if companies are screening for local or regional applicants? Is that a common thing for them to screen for people who live locally?
We over the last 5 or 6 years, we got away from that. But while we haven't gone back to that full bore, I think there is more of a really countrywide search for people. And so, for example, you're working with us to do your resume. It is my advice to not put your physical address on the resume. Phone number, email number, and a link to your LinkedIn profile. It's really all you need. So unless they specifically ask you, they won't know.
Good. Is there any NIH policy for getting a business card for NIH postdocs for interviews or networking? Any useful formatting tips?
There are, you're going to have to check with the NIH. All right. But to go and print your own business cards, and without using an NIH logo, you can put the NIH address on there if you want. but not use the NIH logo, you can do those.
Yep.
All right.
100%.
Yep.
Yeah, as long as you don't use an NIH logo, that's the big thing because you are not representing NIH or the government.
Yes.
But if your own personal business cards, absolutely you can keep NIH and your job title on there, but no NIH logos. That's the big thing.
Yeah. And there's a couple of ways to do this, and they're both pretty inexpensive. You can create your own. There are programs on your computer that you can create your own business cards. When you print those, however, you have to go and buy cardstock paper, which costs about $15. You can go to one of the printing places and you can order 100 business cards, and it costs you about $15.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of ways to do it. Neither one are very expensive.
Yeah, I would recommend doing it through either professional print shop or there are companies online that you can order business cards. And it just looks more professional if it's printed by an actual print shop. How far in advance should you reach out to contacts working at your company of interest? So for example, before you even have an interview or before you see a job posting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yep. You should be, if you're even thinking about moving to an industry position, you should be thinking about lining up your contacts and beginning to have conversations with them. And it doesn't have to be very focused. I'm approaching a transition here. One of the things I'm considering is going into industry positions. You've been there for a while. What can you tell me about?
Very related follow-up question. How do you reach out to contacts you haven't spoken with in many years, let's say 1 to 5 years, without essentially begging them for a job?
Yeah, you don't have to, and it's the same thing, all right? Unless you were kind of heated rivals, reaching out to them, people tend to respond positively to that. And so you just reach out, and it's the same thing. Hey, I'm approaching a transition. I know you've worked here for a while. How do you like it? Kind of what advice can you give me? And that's really all you have to do.
Yeah, people love to help, especially people you already know.
Yeah.
You'll be shocked to see how many people in your network are willing to help out. So yeah, don't be afraid to send, a quick message on LinkedIn, a quick text to someone that you know and have a phone number of. Yeah, don't be afraid to reach out to them. It is not weird at all. It is completely normal.
Yes.
Definitely phrase it in terms of like, I'd love to learn more about your current role, what your experiences are. Let's just catch up about what you've been doing the past few years. I'll tell you a bit about what I'm doing. So yeah, ask for advice and sort of learning more about their experiences rather than just straight up asking for a job.
And on the other hand, if you 10 people, you won't hear back from 10
Not all
people.
of them, yeah. Mhm.
But even remember, if you hear back from 2 or 3, that's 3 more contacts than you had before.
100%. How do you target companies that sponsor visas for international students, international fellows?
Right.
A lot of recent industry job applications ask whether we need visa sponsorship. Mhm.
And the first thing I say when I'm asked that question is I am not a visa expert.
Mm-mm.
And my advice to you is if you have questions on that, go talk to the folks at DIS.
Yes.
They can help you more than anybody else.
Yep.
And this is not a good time to do that. Having said that, there are companies that do it. And there's no scientific way of finding. You just have to find it. The bad news is I just saw the list of H-1B sponsoring companies. I just looked at it this morning before I came. It is companies like Meta and Google and Apple. There are no life sciences companies on that list. So it is a difficult. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. If you are an NIH fellow, go talk to the Division of International Services. They're absolutely the right people to talk to about how to navigate that. They have drop-in online office hours every Monday through Thursday afternoon. So check out their website. Very easy to get in contact with them. If you find a job posting at a company first, then find out later that you have a contact at the company, what should your timeline be in terms of applying to the job versus talking to your contact?
There's no real hard and fast rules there. I think, you certainly, if you see a job that you're interested in, you certainly don't want to wait too long to do it. And it will work both ways. If you send it in, contact your person, that person can help you, can say something, can do that. Or you can ask them and they may say, well, here, do it this way. Excuse me, but it doesn't really matter.
Ooh, this is a good one. How do you answer questions like, what are your salary expectations? Are you interviewing elsewhere, etc.?
Yeah.
What are they offering? Yes. How do you?
Yeah, excuse me.
You're all good.
Yes. The most important thing to do in that is to be honest. If you are interviewing elsewhere, it's okay to say that. You don't have to tell them where. You don't have to tell them exactly what stage you're in that interview process. But be honest. On the salary question, my advice there is try not to answer that question. That's the best thing to do. All right. Sometimes they won't let you get by with that. But you can do your research, and the best way to find out the salaries in these companies is through informational interviews. That's the best way. There are online tools. Salary Wizard is one. What's the other one?
Glassdoor is
Glassdoor.
another one. Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's fun, and those are pretty good. When you see a range, the range tends to be broader than it really is, and there's two reasons for that. Number one, it's self-reported data. But number two, those services don't account for tenure in a position. So obviously, somebody who works in a position for 10 years is going to be making significantly more than somebody that's been there for a year.
Yep.
So when you use those services, my advice is kind of peg it at the low to mid part of that range. Yeah. And the good news on that, even if they ask you that question, and if you proceed through the process and they make you a job offer, you won't be held to that number.
Correct.
You'll still have the opportunity to negotiate salary.
You can still negotiate, absolutely. So deflect, you are perfectly welcome to deflect that question. But yeah, you're not held to that answer if you give an answer. It's another good one. A lot of positions nowadays require some sort of computational biology knowledge or general computational coding knowledge in addition to your life science and bench experience. What's the best way to acquire that knowledge if you're already out of school?
That's a good question. There are courses here that you can take. FAES offers courses.
The NIH library as well. They have a lot of
Yeah,
courses in the library.
That's a good one as well. Your observation is correct. I would say today the majority of the positions are some kind of a combination between computational and benchmark.
Yeah.
So.
Fortunately, there are a lot of great online tools as well for sort of teaching yourself coding. A lot of great programs you can run yourself, teach yourself at your own pace. I think the biggest thing is just make that a priority in your time now, early on. So early in your training, take a couple hours a week to learn some coding skills, to really practice through how you handle those data sets. That's the best way to learn it, is just by doing it. So jump in, find one of those online tools for whatever language or program that you prefer. And just spend some time practicing those skills. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask online or type stuff in the chat. Yeah, a comment from one attendee. If I haven't been in touch with someone for 2 or more years, I don't always feel the need to reconnect, as they might feel it's a transactional call. After a long time, an old contact can feel almost like a stranger. Yeah, I totally understand that. Still, don't be afraid to reach out to them. I think it's less scary and less uncommon than you'd think. But yeah, absolutely. It's a weird thing reaching out to people you haven't talked to in many years. A lot of really good questions in here. While you're thinking of questions as well, I'm going to give a shout out to a couple other OITE events coming up in the near future that you may be interested in. In March in particular, John Taborn, one of our career counselors, runs a series of interview practice sessions This is specifically to practice those kinds of interview questions that Brad talked about. So the tell me about yourself, the SAR questions, the situation, actions, results. Tell me about your strengths and weaknesses. So they are in person only. So if you're on or nearby the Bethesda campus, come participate in those. Just drop in for an hour and have time to really practice answering those questions how you would for an interview and get feedback from John and from your peers on your responses. If you are on a satellite campus, not able to come in person, book a one-on-one appointment with a career counselor. Any of them, Brad included, can run through mock interviews with you as well. It's a great way to really practice going through those questions. I will also include the links for how to book an appointment with the career counselors and the titles of the 2 books that Brad talked about in the notes afterwards.
And feel free to reach out to me by email.
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely.
So, if you've got questions.
Ooh, related to the previous question about coding, will companies take self-taught skills seriously and take it as a formal skill set?
If you can do them, the answer is yes. Right. And kind of the do you bring it up in the interview or not bring it up in the interview is really dependent upon how comfortable you are talking about that experience.
Yep.
So yeah, the fact that it may be self-taught should probably not be of any concern to the company.
There are a lot of ways to get sort of like certifications online or what they call like micro certifications. So sort of mini courses that take you through certain skills such as coding and sort of proving that you know the skills. So if you're interested, that is a thing you can look into, or sort of certifications in certain skills. But yeah, it's really up to your comfort level if we talk about it or not in the interview. Yeah, I think especially in coding, it's extremely common to have self-taught skills. So that is not unusual at all. Great, I see one question online. Rahul, go ahead. Oh, hand went away. All right, I think questions have stopped. So the call there for today. You'll get an extra 15 minutes back on the clock. Thank you all so much for attending. We hope this was useful. And we hope to see you next month at Brad's next talk. Sort of going over the lingo that you hear and a lot of the businessy side of industry, a lot of the terms and terminology that you'll hear in industry that's just useful to know for applying for these jobs and interviewing. And with that, have a great day, everyone.
Thank you all.
Okay.